Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on, making a return appearance after two podcasts without him. It had gone so long since he hadn't been a part of the podcast, but he's back now. We are going to talk about Game 1 of the NBA Finals. We are going to talk about some of the NBA draft declarations that ended up happening on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then finally, we're going to talk about more of the Bryan Colangelo situation because, good God, it continues to get more hilarious. We're sponsored today by Simple Contacts. Cole, how are you doing, man?
It's a little weird after last night. I just kind of sat in the dark for about an hour and a half, 2 hours after the game. Didn't really know what to do with myself. I just thought the end was honestly just kind of a total disgrace between J.R. Smith, the refs. I'm sure we'll get into that in detail. I was just kind of sick after the game, honestly. It was like one of the best games I've ever seen from an NBA player, especially on this stage. You could argue the best stints we've ever seen on a basketball court. And I thought it was kind of overshadowed at the end by things that it shouldn't have taken away from.
Yeah, you're someone who gets very disappointed by that stuff. You're someone who looks for the beauty and the the technical skill that it takes to play basketball. I'm someone who leans into the madness. I want as much of this craziness as I can get. I literally, typically, to go into the weeds here, typically we just kind of riff on this podcast. I think you kind of make some notes, but typically I don't. I just kind of, have topics in my head and then discuss them as we go. I had to list out 8 or 9 things that happened in this game last night just so I don't forget to talk about them. It was so insane, every single thing that happened from tip-off last night all the way until the end of the press conferences last night when LeBron just decided to walk off. It was amazing from start to finish, I thought.
Yeah, and I'm mirroring you. I took notes for this podcast, and I usually don't as of late, so this one was kind of like you had to document everything you wanted to talk about, all the points you wanted to bring up, because it really was that bizarre, not only the game or in the end events of the game, but after the game as well. Yeah,
totally bizarre. Where do you want to start, I guess? Because there are 96 different jumping off points, and I'm not really sure where the best place to start is.
Can we start very briefly with where this analysis should probably be taking place in a vacuum? Is that LeBron was just absolutely unreal last night.
Yeah.
I mean, 51, 8 and 8. The numbers speak for themselves. Some of the stints, to start the game, his play, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody play that well on that stage, considering the gravity, considering the opponent, considering where it was being played on the opponent's floor. I mean, he was just unbelievable for stints in that game. Even at the end, the 2-for-1, rejects the screen, gets to the basket, and then he throws the ball to Hill. He reads when Hill's getting grabbed by Klay Thompson, throws the ball. I just don't know if we've seen the game executed to that level consistently, and I don't want to lose sight of that because of other things that have transpired. I think Rachel Nichols was the one that tweeted that only 6 players have dropped 50 points plus in an NBA Finals game, and LeBron's the only one to ever lose that game. So for me, I just want to make sure that people, I'm always going to understand the gravity. People always say, are we taking LeBron James for granted? And for me last night, it was unequivocally no. In the scale of what has transpired in history, that was just an incredible performance, man.
Yeah, I think that it was probably the best LeBron James game I've ever seen. And it's funny that it happened on May 31st because my previous answer for that would have been, and I've said this multiple times on the podcast before, the May 31st, 2007 game against the Detroit Pistons, where he dropped 48 points and scored the Cavs. I think it was their last 28 points, and maybe it was 28 of 30 and then their last 24 points or something like that. I forget exactly what the numbers are, but it's funny that both happened on May 31st. And it's just insane that he keeps raising his level to the extent that he has. He dropped 51 points last night, and he had 8 rebounds and 8 assists. It was a 51 points that was simultaneously efficient, given the fact that he did it on 37 shooting possessions, as well as unselfish, I thought, too. He wasn't taking over plays really until the end after overtime, where I think he was pretty frustrated. But, he wasn't taking over play and deflecting from his teammates at all. He was playing within the construct of their offense as the dominant force that they were trying to establish and still just dominating and getting wherever he wanted on the floor.
And that's the thing is it really just seemed like he was dominating the game and keeping in phase with the Warriors. And of course, going into that game, the Warriors were heavy favorites, I think 12-point favorites or 13-point favorites. And he was basically just taking control of the game and matching all of the Warriors' firepower by himself. He was handling all the playmaking, all the stuff they were running was contingent on basically him either getting to the rim, beating mismatches, or finding open guys. And he was just executing at a ridiculously high level. He had some stints, I think it was the end of the first half, where he started missing some shots, but overall, his play was freaking phenomenal, and especially the way he started the game, because everybody was kind of expecting, like, okay, we expect the Warriors to come out like gangbusters. They could blow the top off. Of course, we expect that in the third quarter, but even in the first half, and LeBron was just trading blows with these guys. They were up by a considerable amount, and then, of course, it got tied before half. But, man, I don't know. Just looking at that game, I don't know if I've ever seen a player execute at that level, considering the stakes, and basically it was just him. Like, he was responsible for everything, and he was going toe for toe with probably the best, most dynamic team I've ever seen.
Yeah, he dropped 51 points on a 69.2 true shooting percentage last night. Just a totally bananas performance to me. Again, like, I don't even know how to put into words what he did last night. He was, from start to finish, just totally incredible in every single way. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with LeBron, given the just multitude of topics we have?
I mean, I'm good on that. I just wanted to start with clarifying that was that was a historically good game in context, and it would be unfortunate if it wasn't remembered for what it was, and it was one of the best games we're probably going to see from a guy that is playing at the peak level. I mean, he's playing at a level right now that he's the best player of all time. If you want to debate Jordan with him, I've never watched Jordan consistently in person or at the time growing up, so I don't have strong takes there. But it's hard to imagine that somebody could execute better than LeBron did last night at this kind of level right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that was arguably the best NBA Finals performance ever. It's probably up there. I mean, the Magic Johnson game where he had to play center and then had 42, 15, and 7 probably stands out. Beyond that, I mean, maybe Elgin Baylor dropping 61. I think that Bill Russell had a 30 and 30 game at one point in the finals, but it's up there. It's genuinely one of the top 10 NBA Finals performances ever. And we got to see it last night. So I don't think we should lose sight of it. And we should also now move into the fact that this game was marred by just straight up messiness. There's not really a way to describe it. From the referees to J.R. Smith to the way Kevin Durant played. To Jordan Clarkson playing. There were so many messy aspects of this game. And I'll again cede you the floor. Where do you want to start in terms of the mess?
Oh, man. I guess maybe the call, because everybody wants to talk about that, even though I don't think that's on my priority list. It's not that high as far as
the block charge.
Frustrated with. Yes, the block charge. Sorry for not clarifying. Yeah, the block charge, just because I felt like that was where most of the reactions were being elicited, because that was kind of the start of the snowball effect where everything kind of went awry.
So, yeah, I guess that where my thought is on that is that I think they ultimately got the call right. I do think it was a block. His momentum is still going into Kevin Durant. I don't think he has officially established his position by the time that Durant goes up for the shot and makes contact. His body is still leaning, and I think that his momentum in a substantial way is still going toward the guy taking the jump shot, or taking the layup, I guess, in this case. Having said that, there is no circumstance where the referees should be going to the monitor for that. He was a foot and a half outside of the semicircle. There's no real recourse for having to go to the monitor. If you can't see that he is out of the semicircle on that play, you probably should not be officiating an NBA game, because it was very abundantly clear.
Yeah, I broke this down into 4 parts. I think the first part is the trigger for review. So the standard being you not being reasonably certain is the correct nomenclature, I guess, as to whether the defender is inside or outside the restricted area. So that's the issue, is did the refs kind of manipulate the rule to change the call? And the reasonably certain thing is a low bar, but I mean, like you said, he was clearly not in the restricted area. It was pretty obvious, 1.5 feet, 2 feet outside. So from that area, that's where a lot of the pushback from, multiple fans, including the Cavs fans especially, is why do they even review this in the first place when that is the standard? It's a low bar again, but there's no reasonable take on that. If you were watching the play, I mean, they could have been watching for contact. We don't know. It's hard being an NBA referee. I'll cede that absolutely, but just from that vantage point, the first prong to me wasn't really satisfied.
Yeah, so I guess that. What is your final take on it? Would you rather them get the block charge right, even though they went to the monitor under, in my opinion, false pretenses, or would you rather them just play on and not have review in that case?
It's a really complex question just because I don't think it was as clear-cut as a lot of people think. I tend to side with you. I think it was probably a block, but the people that say that it was unequivocally a block, I don't see that. Even when we saw in the broadcast, Javi thought it was like a legal guarding position. That was another definition thing you have to answer. I don't know if this is one-sided. Jeff Van Gundy was the same. I think there was more dissension. But it depends, to me, honestly, it's about the review standard to overturn. We see this in the NFL, so with NFL challenges for coaches, there has to be indisputable evidence to overturn a call, correct? Like when a catch is made, if you can't prove that the catch was incomplete and it was ruled a catch on the field, you can't overturn it unless there was indisputable evidence. And I'm not sure if that was the case here. It was a pretty close call. I think it would have been fine either way. I would have leaned again towards a block call. But can you overturn a judgment call based on another judgment call? You know what I mean? It wasn't the standard review to me wasn't really clear. It's just a policy issue overall, the slippery slope argument. Jeff Van Gundy made this. If you overturn one judgment-based call, do you have to go back and review a bunch of other ones? You don't want refs getting involved in these kinds of things and overcorrecting and overturning calls that are judgment-based. So for me, that's kind of the takeaway is, I don't know how you do this effectively. I don't know how you review the call based on a judgment and then overturn it based on not clear, irrefutable evidence, but I don't know what the standard is. So it's a really tough question. I'm not sure if they got the call right 100%. I think I would lean that way. I don't know if it was that clear to me, though, and definitely probably not clear enough to overturn the call that was already made on the floor, if that makes sense.
Steve Javi, just the human energy sucker from any moment. I mean, that guy they could pop his face onto the Americans finale and I would just be like, no, I'm done. I can't. I can't with this anymore. Yeah, it's a tough call, I think. Ultimately, I'm probably on the side of Jeff Van Gundy in that I don't think you can overturn block charges like that. Like judgment calls like that, I would prefer them to not overturn those. I would prefer them to not have the ability to overturn those and go to the because what it ultimately ends up happening is they have to go to the monitor to do it, and it just disrupts the flow of the game in such a substantial way. The Cavs had pretty solid momentum at that stage. It was after a big LeBron drive. LeBron comes down on the other end, takes a Kevin Durant charge. They win that game if that doesn't happen. They flat out win that game if Kevin Durant ends up getting called for a charge there, I think. No question about it. I mean, maybe not no question about it, but in my mind, they're going to win that game. And yeah, I think it's just a really hard sell for me to have a circumstance where such a judgment call is being reviewed and, looked at from every angle like that and determining the outcome of a game after the judgment had been rendered on the court already. I don't know. I think they got the call right ultimately, and maybe that's the most important thing, but I don't know. We need to just make the rules better about block charges, I think. If a guy, this is something I've been saying for a while, you can call charges while a guy is on the ground and while he's driving toward the basket, but once he goes up for a shot, you really just can't have a charge anymore. I think should be the rule. I think that is the smartest way to go about enforcing these things. Force the defender to go up and defend the shot actually and defend it in a coherent manner. I think it would make basketball more exciting in general, and it would make life easier on the referees. But, that's not the way it's called right now. In general, the referees were atrocious last night too. They were awful. And I think that it would be fair to say that the Cavaliers got a bad whistle last night. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's, the league wanting Golden State to win. I just think that the Cavs got a shitty end of the draw last night, and they got a really bad whistle, and their fans are rightfully pissed about it.
Yeah, and especially late in the game. I mean, there's going to be human error in this. There's going to be some inconsistency. There were some, I think LeBron got hacked once, it wasn't called, and like the same exact play happened to Durant, and they called the reach. So I get the complaints with that goes, but overall, I just don't want the officials interjecting themselves into games, like especially with the review process. So, there's going to be human error. You're going to miss calls. That's going to happen. Hopefully, you mitigate that, and you see what officials are better and in the moment and making and processing these calls quickly. But I don't want officials interjecting themselves and reviewing plays that are judgment calls. I mean, you just have to live with the initial call, and especially overturning a call that you previously made when it's not like irrefutable evidence. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like that, just the process last night. This is the least I care about anything. I think this is definitely an important swing point, like you noted. Probably the Cavs win the game if this call goes the other way. But it's just worth pointing out that you don't want the uncertainty. It feels like the NFL catch rule to me, and that is such a dark cloud hanging over the league sometimes.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I think there were multiple other calls too that could have gone against Golden State, and I think that if those calls go against Golden State and go toward Cleveland, they probably win the game again. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really tricky spot. I think that the league needs to really do something about the officiating this offseason, be it rewriting the rules to make it easier on officials, be it investing more in training for officials. But the players are pissed. That's the problem now. There are legitimate gripes between the referees and the players. We saw it throughout the course of the season. It kind of came to a head, if I remember, in January, and they had to have like a meeting kind of. But when there's no faith from the coaches, from the players in the officials, which I think that faith is rapidly diminishing, it becomes a significant problem for the league. And I think that Adam Silver and I think that the rest of the entire, front office of the NBA would do a smart job to get into looking into why this is a problem right now. Me personally, I think it's a problem just because basketball is getting harder to officiate. Like I honestly kind of empathize with the officials. Yep. I think that they have an incredibly difficult job that is getting more difficult every year as guys get bigger, stronger, faster, as the game is played more out in space and you guys get more downhill and it becomes harder for them to avoid contact, and officials get put into more 50-50 call situations now. And because, to be honest, like a lot of officials, it takes a long time to master officiating, and a lot of officials, by the time they do it, are 40 plus years old. It's hard for them to keep up. Like I think that maybe even adding an official would help reduce the burden on officials, like adding an official on the court and making it 4 officials instead of 3. It's a very, very complicated matter, but I think it's something that Adam Silver really has to kind of sit down with the officiating association, whatever the hell that is, and try and iron out. No,
that was really well said. I totally agree. To wrap up officiating, you want to talk about briefly the end of the game as far as the Thompson, kind of that series of events?
Yeah. I don't know what the fuck the referees were doing. I'll just be honest. I hate that bullshit stuff that players do where he shouldn't have shot the ball, he should have taken the turnover. Nah, fuck that. It was 2 seconds left, the shot clock was running out, and he took a shot to avoid the shot clock violation. He wasn't running up the score. If the shot clock's turned off and they go in and dunk the ball, sure. You want to get pissed about that? Be my guest. I think you should stop him instead of get pissed about it, but I can understand why players would be angry about that. In this circumstance, it's ridiculous to get angry about that. It is so absurd on Tristan's behalf to be pissed about that. Having said that, he just closed out on a jump shooter. I get that his elbow was high, but I don't think he even tried to elbow him. I think that he just tried to close out aggressively on a shooter, and that it may have looked bad from Tony Brothers' angle or Ken Mauer's angle, whoever it was.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that, similarly to Sean Livingston taking that shot, Tristan Thompson has a right to close out. And I thought Tony Brothers completely jumped the gun. I think in his report after the game, he noted, from the angle that I had, this is his quote, from the angle that I had on the floor as he is coming towards Sean Livingston, meaning Tristan Thompson, his elbow is up high, and it appears it hits him in the head when he's coming toward him. So that's why I called a foul and ejected him. I just totally thought that Brothers jumped the gun there based on what he saw. It was just kind of a weird call in that moment just because there was no hesitation. It was like, I'm just throwing this guy out. And magnifying all that as Draymond Green being Draymond Green in overtime, like taunting Kendrick Perkins on the bench. He started waving at Tristan Thompson like directly at him after that happened. I mean, that's Draymond Green. I'm not going to sit here and kill the guy. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this guy's a clown." I mean, that's who he is as a player. He gets himself hyped up. He does borderline classless shit, and that's just what he is, and that's how he contributes to the team. Yeah, it's just kind of in the moment.
I have no problem with what Dre did. I just want to bring that up. I have no problem with Draymond causing a ruckus, basically, like Draymond always does. It's what he does. Like, as long as he's not putting other players at risk and he's just playing to the crowd and talking shit to the other players, like, that's fine. As long as he's not kicking dudes in the nuts, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I just thought that, I mean, he definitely escalated things too, and the officials didn't really counter that. And when Dre gets one technical, like, that's his strategy. He's just going to do whatever the hell he wants because he knows he has a ton of rope. Like, and he's done that. Like, he does that numerous times in his career. He knows what he can do. He knows what he can get away with, which is basically everything. So he was going off. It just kind of felt a little ridiculous and one-sided against. I mean, Tristan Thompson lost his cool for sure. 100% he did. But in that moment, considering he just got ejected for no reason, and then, you know, the officials weren't curtailing Draymond's taunting either after that. It was just kind of like, okay, sure. I mean, it got more out of hand than it needed to. I felt like the officials could have done a better job in that stint.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. We've talked for like 23 minutes, 22 minutes, something like that. And we haven't brought up J.R. Smith yet. Thoughts on what was arguably the dumbest play in NBA Finals history? Because holy shit, you can make that argument, and we didn't talk about it for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I had a different reaction than a lot of people. I think you got to this at the beginning of the podcast. Like, this shit just pisses me off. Like, I was legitimately angry after this happened. Just looking at it, like, you have to know time and situation. I know the popular thing is throwing up a J.R. Smith meme, which is fine. I mean, I probably shouldn't take things so seriously, but you have to know time and situation. How many times have we talked about on the podcast as far as, like, Brad Stevens types, who they understand in the moment, they adjust in the moment. You have to know where you are, not only in the game, but on this planet, J.R. Like, there's no excuse for that. He's a veteran. Like, this guy's over 30 years old, and you're like, LeBron just had like 51 points, and it's one play. There was no margin for error against the Warriors. There's none, and you don't know where you are on the floor, and it's one of the most asinine fucking plays I've ever seen in my life. Like, there's just no explanation for it. There's no, I know. Post game, there was some. I guess they weren't on the same page. JR was like, "Oh, you know, I know what the situation was," after he told Ty Lue, who reported it differently.
There's literal fucking video of JR going like, "I know. I thought it was tied." I mean, come on.
It's unreal, man. That whole, like, the post game stuff. I'll let you talk about that.
I thought we were in the lead. I'm sorry. He said, "Yeah."
No,
yeah. No, it's insane. It's insane. This stuff, it frustrates me. Like, I get that basketball is so hard, especially on that stage. It is so hard, but you have to know the time and score. Like, JR is getting paid $14 million. We can't absolve him of this thing. No matter how bad I feel for J.R. Smith, because he just made an epic gaffe in front of like 50 million people watching this game. And, like, again, I empathize with that. But fuck, man, you got to know the score. Like, you just have to know the score. You do a great job of inching Kevin Durant under the ball. You get the rebound. You set yourself up for an awesome moment, and that's what happens. You just, it's dumbfounding to me that this is a situation, and it was obviously dumbfounding to LeBron James, who had just, you know, dropped 51 points or dropped 45 points by then or whatever. And you ruined that performance because of your asinine decision making. And, you know, this is what JR is known for. And I think that this solidified his reputation for the rest of, like, his basketball career. He is now the guy who is going to be known for epic gaffes like this. And he was kind of known for that already. But, you know, this is still a guy that he's 12th all time in NBA 3-point makes. Like, I think that he gets the short end of the stick as an NBA player often. Like, he is actually a very useful NBA player. He is going to be a top 10 3-point shooter ever. But he's going to be known now for being the guy who dribbled the ball out when the game was tied in the NBA Finals during LeBron James's 51-point game. And he's going to be known as the guy who continually makes these errors. And I feel bad for him, but he's brought it upon himself in a significant manner. And that's, I mean, there's not really any other way to say it at this stage.
I mean, if it was a rookie, it would be much more understandable. Then you'd kind of question, why is he out there or something? But JR, he's been in the league forever, man. Like, he should know time and situation. There's no excuse. And it's not just JR. It's also Ty Lue. Like, there's two. I think I freeze framed JR dribbling out to half court, and there was about 2.5 seconds left on the clock, and JR was literally not even looking at anything but like the opposite shot clock.
Yeah, he was turned around totally.
It was completely clear that he had no idea what the fuck was going on. And that's a moment, again, that's why I brought up Brad Stevens before. It's like the ability to process that information quickly is valuable. Like, Stevens is calling a timeout there 100%,
I think
1,000% in my opinion, because he's done that before. Like, when his team's not executing what they want, what he wants them to, he will call timeout. There's just no excuse for not doing that. Like, in the moment, I know it's like, I can't really sit here and criticize because I've never been in that situation. It's a very high stakes moment, but that's what you're paid to do. That's your job. And there was no reaction by either one of the player or the coach, and it ultimately cost them the game. I think, like, it's funny that we don't even talk about George Hill missing the free throw, which is definitely a part of the game, and I'm fine with that. Like, players miss shots. Players don't execute when they're supposed to within the realms of making shots in a game. But it's inexcusable to not execute the mental process and know where you are, time and situation, all the execution stuff. That has to be there.
Yeah, and I think I'm a lot more willing to absolve Ty Lue in that situation, just because how the fuck do you think JR is going to do that? Like, I mean...
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I've never seen something like that. And the funny thing is that Jeff Goodman tweeted out, I think I remember J.R. Smith doing this 15 years ago in an AAU game. And then I retweeted it, and someone hopped in my mentions and said, yeah, it was against my team. So, like, this has happened to JR before, too, is the funny thing. And, I mean, if you're Ty Lue, you can't expect that, I don't think. I'm a lot more willing to say, like, you know what, Ty, it's fine, go ahead. And yeah, I agree with you on the George Hill thing. Like, George Hill fucked up, but it was an execution error. It was, I just missed a free throw. I mean, realistically, he's an 80% free throw shooter. He kind of choked in the moment. Like, we can say that. Like, you need to make that free throw. Just straight up. If you're that good of a free throw shooter and you have the chance to win the game like that, you got to make the free throw. But I'm a lot more willing to absolve that error than I am the J.R. Smith error, because the J.R. Smith error is just such a mental gaffe where you're not engaged enough in the game. You could make the case that maybe George Hill was too engaged in the game and the moment got to him, but I'm a lot more willing to say, you know what, George, you're a very good player. You are someone who is very important to us in this series. You just missed a shot. Like, that happens, man. But JR's, man, I can't get over that. That's amazing.
Oh, unequivocally, that's the right way to look at this. I mean, people miss shots all the time when games are on the line. That's part of the game, but there's no excuse for being a professional in the league and not knowing time situation. Like, the J.R. Smith thing was the most disappointing thing by far to me of any of this stuff. Like, that was the reason, like, for all of my being upset post game, was that was the case. It was just that it wasn't the officiating as far as, you know, the charge block. It wasn't. I mean, it was a little bit Ty Lue. I still think that I'm not going to let him off the hook completely. You just got to be able to react to things quickly. But it was definitely JR first and foremost. It was just like, come on, man. There's just no excuse.
Well, I want to bring up Ty Lue next, because I thought he actually did a really good job of game planning for the Warriors. You look at some of the stuff he ran in the first half and, you know, kept them close. It was tied at the end of the first half, obviously. Even in the fourth quarter, I thought some of the stuff he ran was really creative to get them back into the game after the Warriors went up by 6 going into the fourth. I thought Lue actually did a really good job in terms of on the floor X's and O's management. His rotations are a disaster. He played Jordan Clarkson 17 minutes last night, and
oh my God,
Jordan Clarkson, man, like it was harmful to have him out there at every single moment he was out there. He can't defend anyone. He doesn't know how to pass the ball. He was dribbling off people's feet. He was trying to make, like, even when he did try and pass, he was trying to make the spectacular, like, wraparound pass at the basket. I do not understand why Jordan Clarkson has a role on this Cavaliers team. And we'll go from there, but go ahead on Jordan Clarkson, because I'm sure that you have things to say.
Well, I mean, you already got it out there. I have no idea how the hell he's still seeing the floor, especially in a high-stakes game like this, when he hasn't really shown you anything reliable. He's not even making shots. What is he, like 11 of 46 from 3 in the playoffs? Like, he's not even making shots. He's playing next to LeBron, who's going to have the ball all the time. So don't you want more shooting out there? I just think that Ty Lue is so scared of Kyle Korver getting switched onto these guys. Like, Korver's not switching a lot of these matchups. He's kind of just trying to hedge and cover to his guy. you just got to put the guys out there that you trust. And Clarkson, he's just gunning, man. He's not passing the ball. He's not making smart reads. 2 of 9. I know he's a +8 in the game. I don't really care about that. He's just not making an impact on the floor.
He's making an impact.
Oh, negative impact. Yeah, not an impact that's going to help the Cavs win this series. But at this point, just play Chetty Osman, play even Rodney Hood. I know he's horrible defensively for the most part, but can they really be any worse than Jordan Clarkson? Like, when do we expect the pendulum to start swinging the other way here? It's just this has been the entire case for the playoffs. Jordan Clarkson hasn't been good. So why is he still in the rotation? Why is he still getting high priority minutes in the finals?
He's averaging 5 points a game on 7 field goal attempts per game. He's shooting 30.3% from the field, 24% from 3-point range. And again, he's a sieve defensively. He's just a mess out there. Maybe he can be better next year whenever he's integrated into their system. I actually thought in LA he was a solid basketball player. He makes mistakes here and there, no question about that, and he'll take over possessions and do a lot of the things that I hate about Jalen Hands as an NBA prospect. But at the same time, you can't have him out there right now against Golden State. You just can't do it. I know that Dave McMenamin tweeted out that Ty Lue thinks that he's fearless, and that's why he likes to have him out there, is because he thinks he's not afraid of the moment. I wish he was a little bit more afraid of the moment. Like, to be honest, it's a problem right now for him. Let's talk about Kyle Korver as well, as you kind of mentioned. Korver has been their third best player in the playoffs, I think. And you can talk about if George Hill's been better. You can talk about I guess you can make the case for J.R. Smith being better. I certainly wouldn't. But I think that Kyle Korver has been their third best player in the playoffs so far. He is a perfect fit out there with LeBron James. I get that it's a problematic matchup from time to time. I don't care. I just don't care. You have to have him out there. He spaces the floor. He is a plus out there for you because especially when Andre Iguodala is out, because it spaces the floor for LeBron James. And as we saw last night, the Warriors don't have anyone to guard LeBron, just straight up. Like, no one can stay in front of him right now.
Which doesn't make any sense to me why he's not out there more. I mean, the Cavs were 7 of 30 outside of LeBron from 3 last night. Like, guys just weren't making shots. Kevin Love, 1 of 8. Jeff Green, 1 of 6. Get Korver out there. And I just think Lou's so terrified of switching Korver onto like a Durant, onto a Klay Thompson. Because, I mean, the Cavs are switching most things. It's worked pretty effectively for them as far as, like, Larry Nance was really, really good last night, especially in the first half. Like, they have the athletes to switch, but apparently they just don't want Korver to do that. And I think the trade-off is well worth it. Like, you keep switching, you stay disciplined, because that takes away some of... And Korver's a good team defender. Like, he's pretty aware off the ball, so he'll make the right reads for the most part. And you need him offensively. You need his gravity off LeBron. If LeBron's going to have the ball and they're going to play this kind of mismatch game, kind of like Houston did, but a better iteration of that, Korver moves off the ball. That's another thing, is he really instills that in the Cavs system. He's going to go run off ball. He's going to set random screens. That's going to be important. You want to keep the Warriors moving. You don't want Draymond to set up on LeBron drives, like helping off a guy and make clear reads. You want to make things complex. So for me, the trade-off is easily worth it. You get Korver's offense, you get his off-ball gravity. Maybe you sacrifice some individual defense. If he gets switched on to Kevin Durant and Kevin Durant shoots over the top of him or posts him up, you live with that. For me personally, that's what I would do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I would, if I was Ty Lue, I would probably be closing with George Hill, Kyle Korver, Kevin Love, LeBron James, and maybe Jeff Green. Jeff Green I thought was pretty okay last night.
Yeah.
He's a good passer. He keeps the ball moving for them. They were great on the offensive glass last night as well. They had 19 offensive rebounds. That was just absolutely terrific. They had, I want to say it was something like 40% offensive rebounding rate. Very, very, very good performance from the Cavs role players doing the small things to help LeBron out, other than J.R. Smith just making the biggest gaffe, arguably in finals history. Couple of other quick notes. Kevin Love was great last night. I thought Kevin Love played an absolutely terrific basketball game. 21 points, 13 rebounds. Goes like 10 of 20. I think it was 9 of 20 now I'm looking at it from the field. Didn't even shoot that well from 3, but his sense of gravity just helps them so much because you really do have to close out on Kevin Love as a shooter. Eventually he's going to make those shots. just a great job of making an impact on the game. And he wasn't as bad defensively as we've seen in the past against the Warriors. I thought he was actually pretty okay.
He's going to struggle. I mean, we saw late he got crossed up by Steph. He's not going to be able to hang with these. He just doesn't have the length, really, to stay close enough in phase.
I'll say this. In the fourth quarter and, even in the third quarter, I thought he was pretty good defensively. Like, he strung together, especially late in the fourth quarter, like 4 straight defensive possessions where he got switched out onto a perimeter player and kind of, walled off and did a good job of keeping them out of the paint. I honestly thought that by Kevin Love standards, he was a very good defender last night. And by like normal defender standards, I thought he had an average defensive game last night.
Sure. I think that's definitely fair. He was a little late reacting to some drives and stuff, but overall, I mean, you live with that. You need his floor spacing. He's got to make shots. I thought one pivotal point for the Cavs is they got to try to keep the Warriors out of transition. The Warriors had 28 fast break points in this game. You can't let them have those. Like, the more system baskets they get, the more easy baskets, the harder it is to beat them. So on these plays where the Warriors have like 4-on-2 break advantages, where you see a guy on the Cavs fall down, that's probably going to happen sometimes. But when you have like 2 guys, crashing the offensive glass, that's going to be tough because you have to crash the offensive glass. Like you noted, that is a recipe for success for the Cavs. They've seen that in the past with Tristan Thompson taking advantage of switches inside, getting offensive rebound putbacks. You need that. You need to kind of bully the Warriors up front, but you got to strike the balance between doing that and also getting back in transition defense, because you can't let the Warriors siphon off these points on fast breaks. It's any live ball turnover is an automatic basket on the other end. And, if you let them run out after a make, for example, you just have to limit those.
I would also just say, in regard to Kevin Love, I implore the league front office to do the right thing and not suspend him for coming off the bench during the end of that game.
Oh, God.
Not only did he not do anything, first and foremost, like literally did not do a single thing, but also it was your referee's fault that he was out there, because there never should have been a call on Tristan Thompson in the first place. So please let discretion, take place here, and don't suspend Kevin Love. That would be absolutely ridiculous. Larry Nance gave them good minutes last night. That shocked me. I thought he would just be a total mess in this series, given that he can struggle at times being taken away from the basket and being put on an island in pick and roll situations. But he was good. Gave him great energy, 4 offensive rebounds, 11 total, 9 points, a lot of them on putbacks. He was really good last night.
Absolutely. I think his issue is consistency and just being there on a nightly basis. We've seen him play well. I mean, game 7 against Boston, he didn't. So he has stints where he'll provide production, and he has the athleticism. He just gives them a different dynamic because he is so athletic, and that's how the Cavs have to siphon off points in the series, is by energy plays, keeping extra plays alive on the offensive glass, and then Nance can switch a little bit. So I think that really helps them overall, especially if they're going to execute the scheme that they're aiming for. Yep,
totally agree there. Do we care about let's talk about the Warriors real quick. Jordan Bell, I thought, gave them really good minutes. Kevin Durant was really kind of rough last night, was not very good. He did a good job of passing and kind of keeping his teammates engaged in the game, but way too often he was just kind of freelancing and going ISO, when that's just not what the Warriors are best at. There were a lot of possessions for the Warriors where I thought that they didn't have any dribble or any passes past half court, because they were happy to, get a mismatch on a switch and just kind of attack that. That's just not what they're best at. They need to get ball movement. They need to get some off-ball screen action. They need to make sure that they are getting everyone involved in their offense. They are so good at passing the ball, and the Cavaliers are so undisciplined defensively typically, that I think you should take advantage of that more than you should take advantage of the switch situations.
I totally agree with that. I think some of this is like Durant hate is kind of gone too far on Twitter. People are really giving him a hard time. But a lot of these are designed actions. Like it's a design like flex cut action to get Durant in an isolation post situation.
For sure.
So I think he can do a better job of being patient, because that's what the Warriors are so good at. It's like Draymond Green, like their ancillary players will wait until like Steph and Clay screen for each other and one of them pops open. So that's a big part of like what the Warriors fans' diehard situation is, because they've gotten so used to this patience and like taking the best absolute shot within the scheme of their offense. So Durant breaks that sometimes, but a lot of this is by design. Like they want to get him isolated, they want to get him ability to shoot over the top. So he has to do a better job of managing. I thought that he passed a lot better last night. There's been some points in the playoffs where I totally agree with kind of the general narrative of him maybe not hijacking possessions because they're designed for him, but not being patient enough. But I think that like, his rep has gotten a little too tainted by a lot of guys. This guy is still like a top 3 player in the league. I don't know. I guess I'm following the wrong guys on Twitter or whatnot, but I just see like the recourse and like the backlash for him has been a little bit more negative than I would have expected.
Yeah, hot take, Kevin Durant is still good at basketball.
Yeah.
Like, look, just because I think he didn't necessarily play his best game last night, just because I think that there were situations where he, kind of went full Durant when his game is at its nadir, maybe, because he can just kind of break off an ISO at the wrong times. It doesn't matter. Like, he's still Kevin Durant. The respect that the other team gives him opens up so much for his teammates. And, he still dropped like 26 points on 27 field goal attempts. That's not a disaster game. It's just not great by Kevin Durant standards. You know what I mean? And I actually thought he was really good last night defensively, too. He was great at protecting the weak side of the rim. He caused a lot of problems for Cleveland inside. But, yeah, I mean, it's a poor game by Kevin Durant standards more than anything.
100%. And I think like the criticism about him boxing out like on that J.R. Smith play, that stuff is well founded. I just think that, again, maybe the hate has gone a little bit too far. Like, this guy's still playing like really high level basketball. You definitely expect a little bit better maybe at times from him as far as just being patient and playing within the scheme of the offense. Sometimes he can hijack possessions, but I thought he was pretty solid overall. And I mean, I didn't think the Warriors, honestly, any of these guys were lights out. Like Steph he had his moments, of course, in the third quarter.
Oh, I have one.
Go ahead.
I think last night was basically the perfect Draymond Green game for the Warriors. 13 points. He was 3 blocks away from a 5x5, 13 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists, 5 steals. He was awesome on the help side defensively. He was good in the small circumstances where he was just straight up matched up against LeBron. He made his life a little bit more difficult. He did a good job of getting the ball out on the break and getting out in the open floor. And he pissed the Cavaliers off in a way that only Draymond Green can. And it was kind of the perfect Dre game. He was right on that borderline of tipping over. Obviously, he got the technical foul, but never tipped totally over. And that's exactly where you want him, I think.
Yeah, I thought he had a really good second half. I thought the first half he was still, he wasn't making shots. His shot, I don't know what his deal is. Like, he finally got it going in the second half late in the game. But I don't know what his confidence issues, like a knee bend thing. I thought some of the decisions he was making in the first half defensively like weren't normal Draymond, like some weird double teams, and I just don't think he really fit that fluidly into the defensive scheme. I've seen him play better than that, so I guess I'm not giving him enough credit. But yeah, Draymond was solid, especially in the second half. Like, he was one of the catalysts for blowing the game open in the third quarter, pushing the pace in transition, and of course, like I think it was an overtime when he had the block and then he pushed it out, found Clay in the weak side corner for a 3. Like, that's what he does. I mean, he's a fantastic player. I think he definitely had his moments in this game.
I thought Steph was really good last night. Did a great job of taking advantage of mismatches and pick and rolls. Did a great job of mitigating the damage that he can do defensively sometimes in mismatch situations. I thought it was a very good Steph game, and I think that we would be remiss if we didn't mention Klay Thompson, too. Klay Thompson in the first quarter goes down with what looked like it could be a relatively ugly knee injury, and comes back, plays like 39 of the last 41 minutes in this game, goes 5 of 10 from 3, 8 of 16 from the field, scores 24 points, plays pretty okay defense, maybe not up to Clay standards defensively, but was really good defensively nonetheless. It was an excellent game from the Warriors backcourt.
It's pretty incredible that they went 10 of 21 from 3, and I felt like they missed so many open looks.
Yeah. That's what happens against the Cavs.
Exactly right. And then we didn't talk about this because I wasn't on the pod pre the series, but that was my biggest, that was obviously the biggest issue with the Cavs is their communication off the ball defensively, and the Warriors being able to set these quick screening actions to get open. And I thought they did that. They executed that, and they might be able to shoot better than this, which is crazy to say because it's 10 of 21, but they had good looks. They were getting their shots for the most part. I thought the Cavs defended a little bit better than I thought they would probably. Just with the switching, I thought they were a little bit better on detail than I expected, but the Warriors are going to be able to wear them down, I think, off the ball, running these screening actions, because it's just so hard to keep concentrated with these guys moving. They're always moving. They're always finding open spots on the floor. So, yeah, I think that Curry and Thompson were both effective. I have a question for you moving into game 2. Do you think that the Warriors adjust their defensive scheme at all to LeBron, or do you think they keep playing him like we're going to try to take away 3-point shooting, we're going to let LeBron, hunt Curry at times, and we're going to defend you? Basically, we're going to switch. I thought sometimes last night they switched Curry too easily onto LeBron, especially late in the game.
Yeah.
But that seems to be their strategy, is just switch and then play help defense. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be any kind of adjustment there?
I like the fact, so I think in the first half, there were kind of two different things, right? So in the first half, they weren't really sending any help toward LeBron. And in the second half, they adjusted a little bit and started sending a little bit more help.
Yeah.
Once LeBron gets in that zone, it doesn't matter. I think that they need to do a better job of early in the game dissuading LeBron from getting into attack mode like that. And look, we're in the finals. It's going to be hard to do that. But I think that, some playoff games in this playoffs have shown that if you make LeBron's life a little bit harder, he doesn't always just automatically attack like that. And I think it would behoove them to go into that heavier help circumstance. Like, obviously, LeBron or the Cavs are running a lot of action to get LeBron away from the Draymond Green help. But anytime that he's even in anywhere near a position to help, I think they should be sending Dre. And I think that they should have Dre on someone like if Tristan Thompson's in, have him on Tristan Thompson. If Larry Nance is in, have him on Nance. If Jeff Green's in, you have him on Green. The Cavs don't really have like a 5 spacers option that Ty Lue is going to play because he doesn't want to play Kyle Korver with J.R. Smith. So you can almost always have Dre in a circumstance where he's able to come over and help. And I would just make sure and do that a little bit more often early in the game if I was Golden State. I would have Draymond Green and some of their other defenders, obviously, if they're in position, to play more aggressive help defense on LeBron.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm just kind of curious if they throw even more aggressive looks at him situationally, like maybe blitz some and just live with a Jeff Green wing 3 or corner 3. I don't know if that's in the Warriors style. It's just kind of curious to me if LeBron is really going to be at this high level, because that's another thing is,
well, I think the big thing too is though that like once LeBron starts going like this, the Cavs feed off of it and they start to play defense better as well whenever they're very engaged in this game like this. So I think it's important for the Warriors to try and like slow down LeBron early. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. And I think that's going to be interesting just because I think the Warriors are finding out pretty quickly that LeBron is much better than James Harden, and James Harden's like a top 5 player, but the gap between those two is just significant, and LeBron's going to be able to beat these coverages much easier. So I'm just curious if they throw any more of a wrench into what Cleveland expects, give him some different looks just to keep LeBron maybe a little bit more off balance.
Do we have any thoughts on LeBron's outfit?
Oh God. The man can do what he wants after he scores 51, 8 and 8. So I'm fine with it. I'll leave that up to you.
A lot of folks talked shit about the suit and shorts look. Very in if you look like LeBron James. No problem with that look. I couldn't pull that look off, and I understand that unless I was going to like a hillbilly wedding. But like, hey, if you look like LeBron James, I think he pulled it off. I think he looked great last night. Good for him. Simple Contacts is the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It's vision care for the 21st century. If you need to renew your prescription, just take a 5-minute vision test from your phone or computer. It's reviewed by a licensed doctor. You receive a renewed prescription and reorder your contacts. All you need is your current contacts, an internet connection, and 10 feet of space. Why is Simple Contacts so awesome? It's convenient because there are a million things demanding your time. Contact lenses should not be one of them. You should be able to just pop them in the morning and forget about it for a year until you have to do Simple Contacts again. It's fast, it's reliable, it offers choice because they have all brands and types of lenses that you're familiar with, so you never have to shop around to find your contact lenses at the best price. It's great for summer and it saves you money because that vision test is only $20. And if you don't have eye insurance, that stuff costs you over $200 typically. The contact lens prices are also unbeatable. I'm wearing my Simple Contacts, order that I did a couple weeks ago right now. They just make your life so much easier if you wear contacts. I can't emphasize enough. I am a big fan of their product. For $30 off of your Simple Contacts order, go to simplecontacts.com/gametheory, GAMETHEORY, and enter that code GameTheory at checkout. Again, you will get $30 off of your contacts order with Simple Contacts with that promo code. Look, this isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. You got to check to make sure if you have glaucoma. You got to check to make sure that there's nothing going on in terms of disease with your eyes. But if you just want to help and fix your vision a little bit, go to simplecontacts.com/gametheory and get that $30 off today. Cole, Colangelo or NBA draft next? Because I talked about Colangelo like for 40 minutes on the last podcast. I don't want to go crazy on it, but do you want to finish with that or do you want to go there?
I guess let's do Colangelo right now. I don't have a ton of strong takes overall. I just think the whole thing is, God, we just keep upping ourselves on the like fucking crazy scale this year as far as like Kawhi, really Fultz, and now this is like completely in a different stratosphere.
The number one overall pick, basically forgetting how to shoot and having to miss 67 games this year, is not the craziest thing to happen to an organization this year. Think about that. Like how bananas is that? Like Joel Embiid just straight up talking shit to everyone around the NBA would typically be like the number one story for a franchise. There are like 5 76ers stories that have so far exceeded that it's insane. And I'm at the point where I think you have to fire the dude now that it looks like it's his wife that's been tweeting all of this stuff and defending his callers. I don't know. Where are you at on the Colangelo? Should he keep his job? Should he not?
Well, first of all, I just want to give props to Sixers Twitter, who like took this detective job onto themselves and like sussed out all the information, got the contact information, like filling out some of the account information that were used, and I just thought that was pretty hilarious. As far as if he should keep his job or not, I mean, the easiest thing to say is no. Somebody, I can't remember who tweeted this, but somebody made a really astute point. It's like the key takeaway is it worth it? Is it worth all of this to keep Colangelo when they have free agency coming up, a huge free agency year? They have the draft, and it's probably not. Honestly, like they already have their infrastructure as far as their key players. We haven't seen Colangelo do. We've talked about this in the past. It's not like he's made like huge moves when he's been the GM. So is it worth the trouble and worth the backlash that this seems to be causing, especially if it turns out that it was his wife and there's affiliation there? I mean, we've seen this over time and time again. Franchises are always going to side with what's best for business, what's best for the players. And right now, that is not Bryan Colangelo.
Yeah, look, I mean, part of me wants to say, hey, you know, his wife defending the dude on Twitter, I get it. Like, if someone was talking shit about my girlfriend, like, I'd be pretty pissed and would want to defend her. But when you're in that position and you are the keeper of so much intelligence and state secrets and everything that a general manager has to do, if you tell someone about that, even if it's your wife, even if it's, you know, your son, someone that you're close to, you are responsible then for what that person does with that information. And yes. I can't imagine a circumstance where, you know, what looks like Colangelo's wife, at least, we'll say allegedly here to protect us legally, but like, I can't imagine there's a circumstance where that information got to Colangelo's wife from anyone other than Bryan Colangelo. So at that state, you gotta just get rid of him, I think, because no player is going to take this dude seriously anymore. Just straight up. Like no one is going to want him in charge of their organization. If you're a free agent, if you're Paul George, if you're LeBron James, no one's going to want to go there. And like his wife allegedly was talking shit about your star player, Joel Embiid. That can't happen. Just straight up. It can't happen. Like, I guess the Hinkie stuff isn't that big of a deal. If it was just the Hinkie stuff, whatever, his wife's talking shit about the old GM. But you're talking mad shit about players on the 76ers right now. How is that player supposed to come into your office and look at you and respect you when clearly your thought process had to be rubbing off on your wife in some regard, right? Like, I don't think that Colangelo's wife is around the team enough and like has access to these secrets on her own enough to where she's building these connections on her own and she's building these, you know, opinions and thought processes on her own. Like, part of this has to be Bryan's opinions filtering into her mind and clouding her judgment, or not even clouding it, just kind of, you know, making her judgment seem more the way it is. So I just don't think you can keep him. Like, straight up, I do not think you can keep him.
I'm just going at it from a common sense standpoint and like the ramifications, the overall takeaways, regardless of what transpired specifically. Just the fact we're talking about this. Do the Sixers, does their organization, do their owners want this? Of course they don't, right? And what's the trade-off? It's not like you have to sacrifice Joel Embiid. you have to trade Joel Embiid. If this was Embiid doing something, there's no significant cost to doing this. Like Bryan Colangelo, as much as it sucks to say, because I don't want anybody to lose their job. I mean, unless like it comes out that details are very much more specific towards him. I don't want anybody to lose their job. But overall, it's like, is it worth all of this negative publicity when he's fungible? Like it's not like you have a huge stake here with Bryan Colangelo. Like the trade-off of like hiring David Griffin, for example. Like that's probably an upgrade in a vacuum as a GM. So what is really the cost to the organization? They're incurring more of a cost right now with the negative publicity that could affect them business-wise and as far as bettering their team. So I don't understand, like, why is the decision that difficult, right?
Yeah, I basically agree. It really should not be that tough. Let's talk about NBA draft folks that decided to stay or go. I think that, well, I guess for you, who was the biggest name that decided to either go to the draft or return to college?
I just got to say Jontay Porter, just because, well, not because I was shocked or anything. He was the best player I thought that returned that I had on my board. So it wasn't surprising. You know much more about his context at Missouri next year because you're much more adept with the college information. I don't know his setting, but I've heard it's not very good as far as personnel surrounding him. So maybe from that stance, I was like, okay. But he reported to the combine out of shape, and he didn't have like sterling reviews, I would say. There were some immaturity issues. So I'm not surprised, but I mean, he's definitely the biggest name guy that returned for me.
I'll say this. I didn't hear any of the immaturity issues from NBA folks. I actually heard that he was really, really good in team interviews. Was very smart, could diagnose some plays whenever they like drew them up on the board for him. Very nice kid, smart kid. But I mean, you come in with like 14% body fat when the very clear criticism of your game has always been athleticism and staying in shape and that you look like a teddy bear. I mean, you can't do that. I get that, like, you might have issues with it because some guys just generally have issues keeping their weight down, but you can't, like, you got to get into better shape, straight up. And if you can't, then that's a problem for NBA teams. So I am not surprised that he decided to return after the combine because I was kind of starting to hear that was a very distinct possibility. I think I wrote about it like in my thing after the combine that it was a very real possibility. In terms of his situation next year, they don't really have any guards to get him the ball on their roster. So on one hand, that could be a negative because you don't have any guards. That's a significant issue sometimes. On the other hand, they might use him a lot to initiate their offense. And that would actually create some really interesting evaluation settings, I think. He'll have to play at the 4 again because their two best players are him and Jeremiah Tillman. And like Tillman gets in foul trouble constantly, so he'll play a decent amount of the 5. But like, I'm intrigued to see this at least. If I was Jontay, if I was advising Jontay, I would just strenuously say, take this summer, please just don't eat any junk food. Don't do anything of the sort. Get into the absolute best possible shape of your life. And if you do that, your skill set will say that you can go in the top 20 of next year's NBA draft. It's a weaker draft. The big men are not fantastic. Like you can actually make headway for yourself. I think that by the time the process kind of rolled out a little bit, from what I was being told by NBA teams, there might have been a team in the first round that took him just because they really buy into the skill set. They buy into the youth. They buy into the fact that he's such a high IQ player, but probably more of a second round guy at that stage. And if that was the case, I think that it makes a lot of sense for him to return.
Yeah, I don't think it's indefensible. I totally understand it. But now when you return, the lens always intensifies. So if you don't make strides, I think he's skilled. If he's going to initiate the offense, I think he can actually handle that. I thought he was the best kind of 0.5 in the draft if he would have stayed in. But he's got to better his body. You have to work on your body because if he doesn't do that now, and like concerns about work ethic start trickling in, all of that. So he's really got to develop his game and develop his body. I think that's the most important thing for him, is getting in better shape and showing that on the floor. If he shows enhanced athleticism, he can help himself as far as draft stock. Like, again, the draft next year not being very deep. He's easily like a top 15 guy for me from the off, probably top 10. So if he betters his stock, I think that that could be a good move for him overall. It can make him some money.
Yeah, if he comes in like actually in shape and like I get a chance to talk to some folks around that program and they're impressed with what they've seen from him, I will have him in the top 20 next year to start. Like he's that good and he's that talented. Kevin Huerter is probably the biggest name who decided to declare for the draft and officially stay in. Early in the process, it looked like he was probably going to stay at Maryland, but as teams got to know him a little bit better and as teams got a chance to see him at the combine and see him in workout settings, they got a little bit more comfortable with him leaving immediately and being like a top 18 to 22 or so first round pick. I think he had to go, right? Like he basically had to go at that stage.
100%. I mean, he performed well. We talked about him on the Combine podcast. I thought he really popped there as far as shooting and some of the quick decision making he made. And he's 6'7", and he can shoot the ball. That's what every modern team needs, is a wing that can kind of come off movement. I think he's probably the best off-screen shooter from a wing in this class as far as shooting off balance. His ability to like literally sprint off a down screen, catch on the 1-2 from 28 feet, and just the effortlessness of his shot from that range. Like, I think the NBA teams probably went back over the tape and were like, holy shit. Like, this guy can legit shoot off movement. That's what we need and stuff like that. And in conjunction with the height, I'm not surprised. I think you're definitely right. He should have came out. He's definitely a first round pick to me. I think he goes probably top 25. We've talked about this on Twitter as far as Atlanta at 19 making a lot of sense. He's worked out for them apparently. So I think it was a no-brainer for him.
Yeah, I think Atlanta makes a lot of sense. I think that Jeremy Woo said that he has a promise from someone, or at least that's the executive rumors going around. I'd heard that from one person, but I don't know that like that's enough for me to say that like I can categorically agree. But there are enough teams in the top like 22 that really like him, from what I've been told, that he should feel pretty comfortable that he'll end up in that range. I will say I like him. Like, I think he's a top 30 player in this class. I'm pretty worried defensively. Like, he's very short-armed. He is very, very skinny. He does the right stuff. He might end up like a Kyle Korver-like defender, in that he's just smart enough to get by. But, I don't think he's that shooter either. But he can handle the ball a little bit. He's a complicated prospect, I think. Like, I think I would rather... I don't know if I'd rather have got Josh Okogie or him. Would you rather have Josh Okogie or him?
I think I'd rather have Huerter, just because the shooting is more bankable with him.
Yeah.
Like, he can come off motion. I think that's what it boils down to so much in the league now is, can you shoot? Can you shoot coming off different actions and being involved in an offense?
Well, and it's shoot, and then it's also make decisions in a quick manner, and then be able to put the ball on the deck and make decisions. He can really put the ball on the deck, and he can really pass the ball too. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, though.
No. That's a very valid point for sure. And it's coming in a package, again, that's 6'7", not 6'3", not 6'4". The wingspan, I agree with you. I mean, you ideally want like a 6'10", 6'11" wingspan. He's not super strong, but he actually plays a little bit more physical than I expected. Mm-hmm. And to the team defense, he knows where to be. Like, he plays with active hands. I watched his tape a lot yesterday. I think I watched like 3 or 4 games back, and I was pretty impressed. I thought that he knows where to be on that end. He's going to be fine IQ-wise. Of course, he's not going to switch out and be dynamic, but he has pretty solid feet. Honestly, like he's pretty good reactionary athleticism on the ball. We'll see. I don't see him being an impact defender clearly, but if you can get by defensively on that end, and then you can bring the type of shooting that I think he can bring, partake in an offense, if he gets in the right kind of motion scheme, for example, he can make a secondary play. Like, he can come off a dribble handoff, pass over the top at his size. He can handle the ball a little bit. He doesn't have to create an isolation, which I think there's going to be some Klay Thompson comparisons with him, just because when you squint, you see that.
No,
I don't think he's the same caliber shooter. I think there's differences. The ball's farther out in front of his face, Huerter, and it's a little bit lower. Clay's got the better technique, and I thought Clay's first step off a live dribble is much better.
Longer release too for Huerter.
Yeah, it's not the same, but I
think he's like considerably worse defensively.
Yeah, and I think he's the most similar to that kind of player in this draft. But that's when you get caught in kind of trying to make player comparisons and saying Huerter's going to be maybe a Klay Thompson. I would bet heavily against that, but I still think you don't have to be Klay Thompson to be effective in that role at the NBA level.
Here is what I will say though: for a guy like him, I certainly want him playing the 2. Like, I don't want him down the lineup. I want him higher up the lineup so he can shoot over guys. And exactly. I feel like because of that, like, even though he's 6'7", he doesn't really have much in the way of positional versatility. Like, if he can't shoot over guys, then I don't know what his value is. You know what I mean? Like, if you take that part of his game away, yeah, he can put the ball on the deck a little bit, but he's also not going to be a guy that, like, you want consistently making plays at the NBA level. I don't think either. So, like I said, like, I like him. If he was there at like 24, 25, something like that, heavily consider him. If he's there at 22, like, even I think he has to be in your thought process. I don't think I would have him in my top 20.
Yeah, he's definitely a top 20 guy for me. I just think the ability to shoot off movement. I mean, you make a great point about shooting over the top. I think in like a straight like turn and face setting, that's going to be an issue sometimes, maybe on closeouts. But the quickness of his release, it's not Klay Thompson because nobody is, but it's pretty damn quick. I mean, you look at him coming off, and he can really transition into his shot. I think that's going to have value. He's going to be able to switch a little bit. I don't know how effectively defensively, but I still think he can be a little bit more versatile maybe than you do. And I will say that it's not completely unfathomable that Jerry West takes a look at him at 12 or 13. Like, I'm just going to put it on the table. I think that's when he starts to come into range. I think that's high. I don't think he goes that high, but it wouldn't shock me if you see him go lottery draft. And I think that guys are going to fall in love with his shooting.
I think I generally would agree that is where he will start getting discussed. There's no way that I'm taking him over Kevin Knox, though. Like, Kevin Knox is 6'9" and can do a lot of the same stuff.
It's a valid argument. I think that
Huerter's way more athletic.
Yeah, I mean, Huerter's feel is much better than Knox's, in my opinion. But I'm not sure if Knox, you're right, he can come off those screening actions. I'm not sure if he can do it at the level that Huerter can and with the speed that Huerter can overall. But it's an argument for sure. I think that kind of comes down to, being able to optimize Knox. It's like a 2 versus
a 4,
Exactly.
Like Kevin Knox is 4.
Exactly right.
But maybe I will have Kevin Huerter a little bit higher than what I'm thinking. Like, I probably don't take him over Lonnie Walker. Like, you're not super high on Walker, if I remember correctly, right?
I like Walker, but again, I don't think he can shoot the way that Huerter can off movement. But I trust what we've talked about Walker's mechanics in the past. Like, I trust him off the catch for sure, but I don't think he's the same level of IQ guy. And Huerter's bigger, like he's 6'7". I know Walker's longer, more athletic, but I like that size. I like the positional size at the 2 because both guys are probably going to play at the traditional 2, I would guess.
Chandler Hutchison?
Again, I trust Huerter's shot, man. I'm going like this year. I'm more in on just getting guys who can shoot. If you can potentially be a 2-way guy, maybe not a 2-way stopper, but like a 2-way capable player, and you can shoot off movement and dribble the ball and make reads, and I think Huerter can make decisions. Like that's a guy that I'm going to be really interested in. Yeah.
I'm like just trying to figure out like where exactly he should be more than anything, because like I have to do a top 100 for next week. Like I have to kind of actually put my thoughts on the table here, and it's hard. Like I don't know if I would take him over Jacob Evans. I don't know if I would take him over. I probably would not take him over Melvin Frazier, just because I think Melvin Frazier is like an immediate impact defensive player. And I love the athleticism. I love the frame. And I think he might be able to shoot. Like, I just think the upside's higigher.
Yeah, I mean, that's defensible. I think with Frazier, what's the chance that he ever shoots coming off a screen? It's probably not as high. Like maybe a spot shot.
Yeah,
it's just that's a hard skill to learn. Really, is the ability to the control in that setting. It just kind of comes down to what your philosophy is, what you covet in a player. Like I definitely agree that Frazier has stopper potential on the ball. He's quick twitch. If that's what you want on a team, you want that kind of player.
Yeah, I'm
fine with that. But I do think that Huerter, his skill set is harder to get than most realize in a 6'7" guy.
Yeah, I agree with you there. That's definitely very fair. Donte DiVincenzo, probably the next most important guy to make a choice. Should we just throw him and Omari Spellman kind of in the same bucket? Both are going to the draft.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say I was surprised. I mean, Dante's riding the high wave after the title game and then after the combine. Spellman, I don't have a good read on him. I'll be completely honest. I got to go back over his tape and really get a better understanding of his game outside of what surface level shooting and stuff like that. But
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I know. I remember you not being, but I got to get a much better gist before I weigh on that. But what are your thoughts on there?
So Donte, he's definitely going top 40. Like almost no question in my mind. He's going top 40. I think he probably gets taken in the first round somewhere. A lot of teams really, really like how fearless he is. Much in the same way that Jordan Clarkson is fearless, Donte is fearless. The other thing with Donte, though, is that he can actually shoot. I think that you're looking at basically like Jordan Clarkson, who can actually shoot, because Donte can really create plays off the dribble. He's really athletic, gets to his spots with ease. I think that's kind of the player you're looking at. You're looking at like more of a sixth man, high level scorer. He'll probably average like 17 points a game one year, maybe get overpaid at some point. But I do think he's a very useful basketball player for today's NBA, and he will probably be at the back end of my top 30.
Definitely warranted. I mean, he's probably a top 40 guy for me being conservative. He's definitely going to be top 40, but has a skill set the NBA covets right now. And the point you made about being fearless, you can definitely see executives talking themselves into him because he has performed in the big moments. He makes big shots. And on bench units, you can have a guy who can come in, he can fill it up, at least space off the ball. He's an underrated athlete overall, I think. His vertical's good, but it translates to the floor as far as getting on the glass at times too. So, yeah, I would have no problem if he went late in the first round. I think that's probably honestly where I'd bet that he goes.
Omari Spellman, I'm not generally a fan. From a defensive perspective, really all he brings is the ability to kind of wall off in the post. Not a shot blocker. Going to get killed in space. In terms of his offensive ability, I think he's actually a pretty creative offensive player. He can really shoot it from distance. He can actually attack some closeouts here and there. He's Maurice Spates, though. And I just don't think that that's worth taking in the first round at all. Like he'll be like a maybe top 50 guy for me.
Yep, I'm with you. I think there's only 7 first-round bigs for me, and then maybe you can talk about Spellman second round. I just don't value bigs like that highly. So for me,
like Chimezie Metu is way better than he is, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not even a fan of Metu that much. So for me, he's probably going to end up, I don't know, depending on where all the depth in this class is in the wings, like especially in the 20s to the 30s. I'm not going to take him ahead of any of those guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. 100% agree, especially with the way that the league is going. I don't think that it would make sense to do that. The Kentucky guys, it's probably worth mentioning. PJ Washington is going back. You are not like super high on him, right?
Not really, but I'm kind of curious to see. I don't know his setting again. I haven't done enough, advanced research into that, but I do think that he can probably improve his stock a little bit. He actually played okay at the combine. If he can refine his stroke and we see a little bit more playmaking for him, he has the explosiveness and he has the frame. I think he could be something down the road potentially. We talked about it as a small ball 5, but it doesn't surprise me the decision to return.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I think he will be in the conversation for SEC Player of the Year next year. Works his ass off, but he doesn't have that one skill right now. Like Kevin Huerter can really shoot it. Donte can really create his own shot and get to his spots. Omari Spellman for a big can really shoot it. PJ Washington just kind of does like a little bit of everything, and that's a valuable skill set in today's NBA, having a versatile big man who you can play at the 4 or the 5 and, have him attack a lot of different settings. But like a lot of the settings he attacks from, NBA teams don't really love from big guys. Like all the mid-post action now is guys like Kevin Durant and LeBron James and guys who can really create their own shot. PJ does that in college, but I don't know how he's going to do it in the NBA. I don't think he's quick enough to consistently get to his spots. I would like to see him just become a better face-up player. And particularly, he needs that face-up jump shot. But beyond that, we'll see. He's long. He's athletic. Does a lot well already. So not all that bad. Jared Vanderbilt is going to the draft. I have no fucking idea. No idea where he's going.
He'd be one of the hardest players for me to peg. I mean, just because his skill set is so wonky. Like, he just can't shoot at all. He has very little natural touch, but he does so many things on the floor. Like, he can legit grab and go. He's fast on the floor. He's a great horizontal athlete overall.
And vertical athlete. Like, it's both. And leaping athlete. He's a real athlete.
And he's a great rebounder. I mean, his rebounding numbers this year are off the charts. His activity overall. And he has feel, too. Like, I think I probably referenced this multiple times, but at the Hoop Summit, he was the best player on the court with all of these guys for stints of games. Like, he's a talented player. And you can see the talent. It's just like, how valuable is the talent in the modern game if you can't shoot at all? Like, that's the key with him. But I think somebody takes a dice roll. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he went top 40. Is that reasonable?
It all depends on the medicals. I honestly would be lying if I told you I had any idea where he was going to go. I think anyone who's, trying to tell you where he's going to go, I mean, you have to slot him on a mock draft somewhere, like, that's fine. But honestly, half the time once you get into like the second round in those circumstances, you're guessing. I don't know. Based on skill set alone, sure, take him at like 40. But I don't know with the injury history. I would bet he goes undrafted, to be honest. Yeah,
the injury stuff, I totally slipped my mind on that. It's funny with him because if he does shoot, you can't say that with any kind of confidence, because if he can shoot, then like everybody can shoot as far as projection. But if he does end up shooting, I think he's like a lottery level talent. He's that good. Oh, yeah. It just comes down to that's the most important aspect of the modern game, and you have somebody that it's just really bleak there.
Oh yeah, like if he can get to 35% from 3, he is a starter in the NBA. If he gets to 35% from 3 and stays healthy, he is a legit NBA starter because he defends, he moves laterally, he protects the weak side of the rim. He's a great rebounder. He plays incredibly hard. He can grab and go. And then we're projecting that he can shoot. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to shoot it, though, and the injuries give you a significant pause.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Who else was interesting to you? We should mention Wenyen Gabriel, too, while we're talking about Kentucky, I guess. I'm a Wenyen Gabriel guy in general. I would definitely give him a two-way contract.
Me too. He showed more shooting confidence this year, I thought. So with his length and his measurables, he can switch a little bit. I would definitely do the same. I'm not sure if he's that highly valued, but overall, I think he's exactly the kind of guy you want to get on a contract like that.
Yeah, like very, very good kid from all indications, at least. I think I talked to him once, like 3 years ago, when he was coming in that big summer that he had before his senior year of high school. Very, very nice kid. Have never heard a bad thing about him at Kentucky. Also, very modern skill set. Moves his feet well. Plays super hard. Shoots the ball. In high school, had the ability to put the ball on the deck. He didn't really do that at Kentucky, but like people thought he was maybe a 3 coming out of high school because he could really actually attack the basket. Again, like he's just kind of a perfect modern role player. And then his defensive impact on Kentucky this year was real. Like they were like 9 points better per 100 possessions defensively when Wenyen Gabriel was on the floor. Part of that is the Nick Richards adjustment that kind of has to be made for every Kentucky big man because good God.
Oh, that's great.
But at the same time, Wenyen Gabriel's a very real NBA prospect, I think. Like, he will definitely be in my top 100, like maybe even like top 80.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I think another guy for me, Jalen McDaniels, someone who I got to late in the process, obviously returning, has that wiry frame, but you watch his tape, and he's pretty impressive in several capacities. Like, if he can add girth, I think he's a real prospect. I think he could be a first-round pick, honestly. He's got the skill set. He shoots like an easier ball than he gets credit for. I think there is some shot making upside at like the 4. He can switch a little bit. So I'm a fan. I'm going to be really interested. He's one of the guys that I have early targeted watching next year. I think that he's going to be kind of fascinating.
Yeah, he'll be a top 50 prospect for me next year. The thing that I keep running into him though with is the guy we just talked about. Like if Wenyen Gabriel was at San Diego State, he would probably be better than Jalen McDaniels, right?
I think that's definitely a fair argument.
Like Wenyen Gabriel is a better defender already. Like Jalen's a good defender, and I think he's a better athlete, but they both play super hard. Wenyen's just kind of a much better shooter, and he puts the ball on the deck in a better in an easier manner, I think. So, that's where I struggle with it now, because if I have Wenyen Gabriel top 80 or so, and honestly, like that might be low for him because I think he's actually a good basketball player. But how can I have Jalen McDaniels a little bit higher than that? Because Jalen McDaniels, while being a better athlete, isn't nearly as polished.
Yeah, with him, I think you're just betting on maybe a little bit higher of an upside if everything comes together for him. I haven't watched Jalen McDaniels too much. I think I've only seen like a game or two, so I just saw like some tantalizing skills. Some of his motor stuff I just really like.
Yeah.
And when you combine that in conjunction with his age and then his athleticism, I think he's intriguing. He's definitely a guy that I would have fringe first round without knowing too much of the class yet next year. But for guys that are just getting into the draft, I think he's definitely someone to monitor. Yeah,
super bouncy, plays super hard, quick twitch. There's a lot of reason to be excited about him. Do we care about the Martin twins at all?
I'm going to pick Nevada to get to like the Final Four next year. They're a fun team, but from an NBA prospect standpoint, I wasn't super high on either of them. They definitely have their fans. I thought they were more just really, really good college players, and they're going to be really fun to watch next year. Yeah, from NBA folks I talked to, Cody was a little bit more interesting to them than Caleb, just because they believe in Cody's floor game a little bit more than Caleb's, like shooting ability and the ability to make tough shots at 6'6", but I don't think either of them would have been selected this year. And, having those two back, having Jordan Caroline back, it's going to be a big year for Nevada. I think they're a very clear top 5 team in the country. Brian Bowen is going to have to go play pro now. That sucks. Tyus Battle is returning. That's a big one. I had Tyus Battle as like a top 45 guy. You're not as high on him though, correct? Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of him just from the tape I've watched, but yeah, I definitely understand why he went back. Just got to clean up some efficiency stuff and start creating for others. And Syracuse is going to upset my bracket regardless, so you might as well be part of that. 6'7" wing who can shoot it. That seems useful. Shamori Pons is a guy that I really enjoy watching. I think he's going to play in the NBA. He's going back to St. John's. Maybe the best scorer in college basketball next year.
right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's dynamic, especially in college. I mean, he's got that 3-level ability. He's got a little bit more pop than he gets credit for around the rim, a little bit more craft. He's not dynamic there, but yeah, I mean, the pull-up game, if he can really shoot the ball better, because that's his big deal this year is a 3-point shooting. If he can increase that next year, I think he can go second round. The issue for me philosophically is how valuable is a backup point guard in the modern game when those guys don't play in the playoffs. So I think this playoffs actually this year hurt him as far as moving forward, but I could absolutely see him getting drafted next year.
Chris Wilkes and Bruno Fernando are two guys that I will have I'll probably have Bruno in my top 30 next year going into the year. Do you have any thoughts on those two?
I'm glad they went back. I think they need to refine their games, and those are the two decisions that I support the most. Bruno, he has athletic appeal and upside, but his mental ability wasn't there yet. I think he's got to get more consistent. So going back and refining his skills, I think that's going to – both decisions are going to work out better for both players in the long run.
James Palmer from Nebraska, 6'6", 7-foot wingspan, needs to shoot it better, but I like his game a decent amount. Good athlete.
Who's the other Nebraska kid is it Roby? Is that
Isaiah
right?
Roby, yeah.
Yeah, see, I watched him. I like that kid a lot. I haven't watched too much of Palmer, so I guess that's on the agenda.
Yeah, Palmer is good. Roby probably has a higher upside, but Palmer is a lot closer to realizing it.
Yeah, gotcha.
Udoka Azubuike is just very interesting to me because no question in my mind, 10 years ago, he is a top 15 pick in the NBA draft. He could not get enough indication that he was going to be like a top 40 pick in this draft, just by all indications that he ended up going back to Kansas.
And that's not surprising. I mean, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. The value of backup bigs who don't shoot the ball and can't play space defense. That's probably not even a draftable player. Maybe late 50s because teams usually don't really care at the last 5 picks for the most part. But you're not investing capital in that kind of player when you can sign somebody in free agency. They can probably do these things better.
Yeah, I agree. Not a guy that I would draft. Just, if I could get him on a 2-way and maybe see what happens, sure, but not a guy I would draft. Do we care about Kai Bowman? Interesting guard from Boston College, great athlete, very good handle, needs to refine a lot, but interesting at least.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to watch him playing Duke this year. He kind of took advantage of those guys this past year as far as their pick and roll defense. So I like him. He's a dynamic college scorer. He's got that pull-up shot ability. I don't know what he is as a pro, but I mean, it's going to be interesting, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that the last guy maybe is Lindell Wigginton from Iowa State. Really good athlete, very good creator, very much needs to be a better distributor. He's not an NBA player as a scoring guard. He's good, but he needs to get there.
Yeah, this is the guy I was going to bring up to you. Some of his tape is actually pretty intriguing. He had that one huge dunk, and I was like, I didn't know he could do that.
Neither did I. Straight up, I did not know he could do that.
Yeah, he was at Hoop Summit, and he was fine. I thought he was solid, but I never saw that kind of dynamic athleticism. But if he can really get the shooting, he's a pretty good shooter. I can't remember if it was more split towards he wasn't as good off the dribble or off the catch, but there's one area that he needed to refine, and his playmaking overall is exactly right. If he can start distributing at a better level, I think he has some allure as a backup point guard at the next level because he is pretty dynamic. He can score. If he can create a little bit, I think that he might be drafted. I think he's a maybe top 60 guy.
Yeah, I think that I would bet on him getting drafted at some point in 2019 or 2020, but he's got to get there. There was no way that he could leave, I don't think, with the upside being what it is for him.
Great.
I think that's about all I got, Cole. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I think that's good. Wait, really quick, Robert Franks, did he come out or did he go back to Washington State?
He went back to Washington State. Interesting guy, I think.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of glad he did, so now I don't have to go back and watch tape on him because I saw a little bit, and he was very intriguing. I think that he's definitely another guy you should keep monitoring.
6'7", a 7'3" wingspan, shoots the hell out of the ball. Great touch. Yep. Definitely not an on-the-move shooter, but really, really good in spot-up situations. Everyone who played Washington State this year sold out to stop him and Malachi Flynn. Malachi Flynn is leaving and going to San Diego State, which is a problem for them. But Franks still, even in Pac-12 play, had a 60% true shooting percentage on 16 points a game. He was really good, even when he was the opposing team's biggest priority to stop. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Robert Franks too.
Yep.
Top 50, top 60 guy for me next year. So I shouldn't say big fan, but
reasonable fan.
Good player. Yeah, I think he's a good player. Admiral Schofield too, interesting guy for me. 6'4", 7-foot wingspan. Whenever his career began at Tennessee, was probably never going to be an NBA prospect, but now that the league has kind of shifted more toward him, very interesting player, very strong player, and can shoot threes now.
Also a very strong name, probably the best name I've come across since doing this. Is freaking awesome. He's going to be fun to watch. Yves Pons is another guy to watch from Tennessee. I love that kid as far as athleticism. We'll see if he can actually apply that to the floor consistently.
Yep, Kyle Alexander too.
Yep.
6'10", I think, with a 7'4" wingspan, really good shot blocker. Charles Matthews is the last guy I want to talk about, actually, now that I think about it. 6'6", great athlete. Became like a very real defensive stopper for a top 5 defensive team in the country this year in Michigan. Really just needs to shoot it. If he can come back and shoot it, I think he's a top 40 pick.
Me too, from what I've seen. And I didn't watch a ton of Michigan this year, but late in the process, of course, in the tournament, he really popped. So I'm very interested to see him next year. Cole,
tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on in your life.
I won't get too intricate. I'm not sure people will give a shit. But as usual, at stepien.com, I wrote a piece finally I think 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, on offensive takeaways for bigs in the playoffs. So just kind of looking at perimeter skill sets, and some of that applied to Jontay Porter, of course, who's not in the draft, but still I think maybe some valuable information in there about, how the modern game is going. If we should really put so much stock in the current landscape with all these elite players like LeBron and Stephen Curry, of course. So that kind of incorporated that as well. And as usual, continue to listen to this podcast.
It's actually that's a thing I've been thinking about too. Like, I've been thinking about it more in regard to like defensive schemes now. Like, the Warriors at some point are going to break up. Should we really be like trying to build defenses around solely stopping them at this stage?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it's hard to project because when you draft a guy, you're usually drafting like 4 years down the road, 5 years. You're not going to reach your prime. Like, right. The league is not going to be the same in 5 years. I mean, if you're the Cavs or something, or you're a team that's competing, I would build that into the calculus, of course. You like certain players, like a Miles Bridges becomes more valuable for a team like that. But if you're like the Suns or the Kings or something, like, this is not really going to matter. Like, certain tenets are going to remain the same. Like, spacing is always going to be important in the game now. So is versatility on defense. But to the same extent, like, Stephen Curry is going to kill any kind of switch. Will a player that's not quite as good do the same thing? You're going to incur the same kind of trade-offs. I think that's worth discussing more than it probably gets credit for.
Yep, I agree. Go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Subscribe to the podcast. We're up on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, Pocket Casts, whatever podcasting app you use. We are up on. Shout out to the sponsor, Simple Contacts. Go use that code GAMETHEORY for $30 off of your order. We'll be back this weekend, probably after the game on Sunday. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.